My teenage years were a descent into madness, a slow-burning fire that consumed my mind and soul. I became a recluse, hiding from the world behind closed doors and drawn curtains. My parents thought I was just introverted, but as the months dragged on, they grew concerned. They noticed the way I'd flinch at shadows, the way my eyes would dart around the room as if searching for something. And then there were the whispers. At first, they were just a gentle hum, a soft murmur that I could barely hear. But as time passed, they grew louder, more insistent. They were a chorus of condemnation, a cacophony of hate that seemed to come from all directions. "You're worthless," they whispered. "You're a burden. They all hate you." I tried to ignore them, to tune them out, but it was no use. The whispers were always there, echoing in my mind like a mantra of self-doubt. I began to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I'd catch myself talking to myself, arguing with the voices in my head. I'd see things out of the corner of my eye, shadows that seemed to move of their own accord, ghostly apparitions that vanished when I turned to look. My parents tried to intervene, to reach out to me and bring me back from the brink, but I was too far gone. I'd lost touch with reality, and I didn't know how to find my way back. They took me to see doctors, therapists, anyone who might be able to help me, but no one seemed to understand what was happening to me. The diagnosis was a relief in a way. Schizophrenia, the doctors said, a label for the monster that had taken over my mind. But I didn't believe them. How could I? I knew what I saw, what I heard. I knew that the whispers were real, that the shadows were alive. And then, one night, I saw her. She was a pale figure, a ghostly apparition that stood in the corner of my room. Her face was obscured, her eyes sunk in hollows that seemed to bore into my soul. She reached out a bony hand, and as her fingers extended, they seemed to grow longer, claw-like. I screamed and bolted to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers became a roar, a deafening cacophony that seemed to consume me whole. I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. When I woke up, I was on my bed, and my room was just as it had been before. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. And I knew that I was not alone. The days that followed were a blur of terror and confusion. I'd see her everywhere, lurking in the shadows, watching me. I'd hear the whispers, a constant reminder that I was not sane. I'd try to talk to my parents, to tell them what was happening. But they just looked at me with concern, with pity. They didn't understand. And then, one night, I saw her again. She was standing in my room, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She reached out to me, her hand extended. And I knew that I was doomed. As the days passed, my grip on reality began to slip, like sand between my fingers. I started seeing others at school, students who didn't belong, their faces blurred, their presence ominous. They followed me, stood at the edge of my vision, and whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. One day I stayed after school to finish a project in the art room. The building was eerily quiet, the only sound the creaking of the old wooden floorboards beneath my feet. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck as if someone was watching me, waiting for me to make a wrong move. Then I saw it, a shadow darting across the hallway outside the door. My pulse quickened, my heart racing with anticipation. Gathering courage, I stepped into the hall. It was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I turned to head back, but froze. At the far end of the corridor stood a figure. It was taller than any student, its limbs elongated and distorted like a puppet on a string. Its face, oh God, its face was a void, a black abyss that seemed to suck the light around it, leaving only an oppressive darkness. It moved toward me, slow and deliberate, its presence filling the hallway with an unspeakable horror. I screamed and ran, not stopping until I reached the school's exit. When I finally dared to look back, there was nothing there. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. The most horrifying incident happened on a stormy night when the darkness outside seemed to seep into my very soul. I was in the living room, trying to distract myself with TV, but the power went out, leaving me in pitch darkness. Lightning illuminated the room briefly, and for a split second I saw them, the shadow figures standing in a circle around me. They chanted something incomprehensible, their voices a deep, guttural drone that seemed to vibrate through my entire body. My chest tightened as I felt invisible hands gripping me, pulling me toward the center of the room. I fought back, but it was futile. I was trapped in a living nightmare with no escape. Suddenly, I was back in my bed, drenched in sweat. My parents sat beside me, their faces etched with worry. They said they found me unconscious in the living room, thrashing and screaming. It took months of therapy and medication to confront the truth. The pale woman, the shadow figures, the whispers, they were all hallucinations, manifestations of my fractured mind. But the terror they induced was as real as any physical threat. Schizophrenia is a thief, stealing your sense of self, your reality. But it's not unbeatable. Through therapy, I learned to differentiate between what's real and what's not. I discovered coping mechanisms and leaned on my family, who stood by me despite my earlier distance. If you or someone you know is struggling with schizophrenia, please seek help. Mental illness doesn't make you weak or broken. It's just another challenge to overcome. With the right support, you can reclaim your life just as I did.